Welcome back to the class, everyone. Now that we are officially done with all of our Galactic Legend and our Legendary prep videos where we went in and we showed what are the best order to relic all of our requirements in, it's time to take a deeper look at all the Legendaries and which ones have the most value. So that being said, the way we're going to do this is we're going to talk about the least valuable legendaries to the most valuable. And I do want to make this a really clean comparison. So we're not going to be comparing like raid characters or TB characters or like Galactic Legends. We're looking specifically for legendaries that if you gear up the 5 or 10 or whatever characters they are and go in and do the event and immediately get the character, we want to compare those ones because that is more realistic from a farming pattern. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me to start comparing raid characters because you get those at a different rate from a different place that doesn't require this. Anyways, this is all built around what you should be doing for your roster and farming. And one thing I will say before we even begin, legendaries don't suck. Like, this isn't the whole point of this video isn't like a tirade for me to say that BB-8 is garbage and nobody should go after him. That's not really what it's all about. We're doing a ranking video. Someone has to be last, and quite frankly, I think it's BB-8. So without further ado, let's get to the ragging. So BB-8, I mean, there's just really not a lot to say about him, and that's kind of the problem. The best team that he's really a part of right now is the, I guess, Sortie for very endgame, but if you're building a roster, he's more likely going to end up on a JTR squad, which for a squad with 2 to 3 legendaries, gosh, does it not punch up a lot? Like, you're looking at a normal squad. Again, I'm not trying to like hate or say that they're terrible, but like you're gonna beat like some really old school first order teams or bounty hunter teams, or like I don't know. It's really just not that impressive. In fact, it's the weakest resistant squad there is right now. Even if you have like an understarred Zori, it'll end up pulling more weight than like a BB-8 will. And I guess the requirements aren't too harsh, gearing them up or getting them up to like, I don't know, 7 stars, gear 8 or whatever it is. But it just seems incredibly low value in the current state of the game for a growing roster. And in contingency with that, we do have JTR for pretty much the exact same reason. Even the resistant squad she's leading, it is not the same as it was back in the day when she first came out. She was pivotal, the most important team for the Heroic Sith raid. Nowadays, there are just so many better teams that are so much more accessible, lower on. And again, what the team's beating as far as PvP isn't all that great. I mean, I realize she's required for Galactic Legend raid, but I mean, it's going to be really hard to find another legendary in here that also isn't required for a Galactic Legend. So from a tiered ranking based system, the two of them are just going to really fall kind of flat as just overall not that high in value. So very sorry to say BB-8 and JTR, but that's kind of where you are. The next 3 are kind of a pair as well, not in the sense that they go on the same team, but they have a very similar function. Now we're going to start to move into a little bit more of the next 2 or 3 characters, our niche characters, where in certain squads, in certain scenarios, they can prove to be really good, but they're no longer really staples for like a top 8 squad, like core squad that you have to be able to do a number of things. They're good, but just not as versatile as a lot of the ones up on the top tiers of the list. And starting with R2, R2 is pretty much the exact definition of the game's jack of all trades, master of none. That's really what he does. He has so many tags: Droid, Galactic Legend, Rebel, Resistance. He's very happy that we're looking at him right now, apparently. And he does okay in all those squads. But he's not in the ideal Zori squad. He's not in the ideal CLS squad. He's not in the ideal Padme squad. He's not, I guess he is in the ideal Sortie squad, but again, Sortie is still a much newer character that a lot of people don't have access to, especially because she's really gated behind Kairos. So yeah, he's good, but I'm going to put him a little bit lower value. Again, he's, I guess, another stepping stone to be able to get to CLS and to higher stuff like that, but overall, just doing a little bits here and there, not really pulling the weight and changing a bunch of counters on their head. Thrawn, man, this is a little bit of a fall from grace. He used to be one of the most important legendaries out there, and one of the main reasons why is because whatever broken character that came out, it didn't matter what it was, he could fracture them. And that was really like super valuable for the longest time. It was instrumental in getting Trey to work against Giant Revan, or getting Giant Revan to work against Darth Revan, or Darth Revan to work against Gas. It was helpful in all those counters every single time. But unfortunately, post-Gas, Galactic Legends came out, and then eventually Thrawn's ability got nerfed to the point where it no longer fractures well. doesn't fracture in the true sense Galactic Legend, where it just is going to reduce their speed, similar how it would do to a raid boss. And that kind of made him fall off a little. But again, he's still very useful. He's actually pivotal in a handful of counters, but they're not just your everyday, every account is going to constantly need him to be able to do things. So good, yes, but not really near the top of the list. Bam is actually going to find himself in a very similar situation. I'm going to rank Bam just slightly higher, because he actually can form his own team that can be formidable. Towards the end of the game, Dash kind of takes over in that regard, and Bam ends up kind of going to a Fennec squad to typically proc damage immunity, but it can be good. Like, he can do plenty of really nice things. His leadership is actually pretty solid when you take into account all the things he does for Scoundrels, and it's pretty easy to put together a Scoundrel team. Maybe not a good one, but one where you just have a lot lying around, and you're not just having to constantly gear up a bunch of these other characters to be able to get his team to work. And then again, he has just overall versatility on whatever random Scoundrel or Mandalorian team that you eventually need him on. So very, very good niche kind of characters. The next set that we're going to look at that are slightly higher value are going to be legendary leaders that are really nice for a full squad. Grand Inquisitor is going to rank the lowest on this, and the reason why, it's not because he's bad, and quite frankly, it's not even that he's worse than Padme or Emperor Palpatine, but the entry cost for him is so stinking high. The Inquisitors are now accelerated, so that is awesome. But that being said, they all still require a ton of Cairo. And as far as overall value, that's going to make him plummet a little bit, because it's a lot harder for a newer player to go after him. What are they sacrificing? Like, what is the cost benefit for going after Grand? What are you giving up to be able to make that happen? I don't think the payoff is necessarily high enough to put him really high on the list. He's really going to end up somewhere here in the middle. Still a great leader, still can take out a lot of things. Again, like most of these characters on the list, he leads to a much bigger road, being Reva later on, assuming you are helping your guild out in that endeavor. But I mean, if your entire guild isn't going after Reva, then like that motivation really isn't there, unless you're wanting to swap guilds, which is a reason. So Grand Inquisitor is going to find himself there. We have Sadme, who is sad because she died of sadness, not because she's bad. She's a very good character. One of the things that has aged fairly well about her, actually, is her leadership, giving courage, which does max health damage. There's a lot of characters out there that are super stinking tanky right now, and as long as they aren't immune to max health damage, boy, does this pack a punch. This has been very nice. One of my favorite counters in 3v3 with Padme is to use her, Gideon, and I think it was Grandmaster Yoda, actually, and to be a Star Killer squad. As long as you can go first, Gideon can juice Padme. They can just start deleting stuff. And she's not trapped in that. She's good in both the territory battles that are currently out right now. She is versatile across various game modes. She ends up being really good in the later game on a JMK squad to be able to make protection come up constantly when people assist at a turn or attack at a turn. So yeah, she just has a lot of overall value. Great leader, and this is going to start to become a bigger consideration. Her requirements are also typically really solid. You can either build kind of a weak Geo team that can be helpful in your whole roster, or you can just get General Grievous at Gear 13, which is also really good. So overall, her requirements end up being a lot less dead weight than a lot of the characters lower on the list that we've kind of looked at. So super solid. Palpatine, very important, very high, I would say high value character. This is probably where the ifs are turning to strength. Something's changing. We're starting to get to a better kind of tier of character. And the reason why is just his leadership gives him a stupid amount of turn meter. Similar to Bam, he's going to be able to build a team easily between Empire and Sith. Mara Jade, who's really one of the best ones with him right now, is also accelerated. It doesn't necessarily have to be Gear 13 with all the Kairos. She can start to work before that. So overall, just a lot of value in that team. And both in the beginning game and the mid game, he does all right with himself or Mara Jade. But even in like the super end game, Starkiller comes and just boosts him into really, I mean, not himself, but the team is really Galactic Legend level tier in both GAC as well as Territory Wars. And then it's just a really fun squad, either using Conquest for the Halcyon outfit, which is always there, as well as for Rote TB. It's a mixed squad that you can use pretty consistently. So Palpatine does have a ton of value, and also his entry level cost. One of the things we were kind of complaining about Grand is you have to gear up and relic up a bunch of characters with Kairos. Palpatine, I mean, you just need like a Phoenix squad. Like, it's not hard. I mean, it can be any Rebels. It doesn't even need to be Phoenix. So a lot of versatility as far as gearing him up goes, or gearing up his requirements. So very solid there. And now we really start to work our way. Like I said, we've been going through tiers here of like super low value, kind of niche, These were just like really general, nice leaders. The next sets are going to be the real powerhouse teams, because what we're going to see in the next 3 sets is they are teams where multiple legendaries are really good and they are pulling a lot of weight. These are going to be really high tier legendaries in the overall teams they're making. And it really goes to show that starting off with Darth Revan means that the rest of them are going to be just super good. So Darth Revan, he is really nice to have. His requirements are somewhat good. You do get Bastila Fallen out of them, and I guess HK is kind of nice. I'm not sure if I'm going to advise that for a growing roster when Leviathan is probably years away from most of them. But overall, he's a solid kit. One of the things that I liked about him when they made this kit originally is they did put some weaknesses in there with the ferocity, which makes him fairly counterable with things like Grievous, at least when Grievous is not in lead, so he doesn't get death marked. But it allows for a lot of other counters too, where they can just do a significant amount of damage because of the amount of defense he's losing with the ferocity. But he is a good character. The speed coming through the ferocity and debuffs in general just make him go zoom, zoom, zoom. And then pairing him with Malak is where most of the value really starts to kick in. Just a really good pair. The two of them themselves really can't punch all the way up to Galactic Legends, but you start to get kind of close with this type of duo. And I guess it's probably worth mentioning, the Malak does just have a ton of plug-and-play viability. Typically, it's actually kind of awkward. Typically, when you have a character that has plug-and-play viability, it's because they do something specifically with a lot of teams. Like we could label R2 as one because he goes with GR or droids or resistance. Malak is the opposite in the sense that he's not good with a bunch of teams. He is bad for a bunch of opposing teams. We're constantly having a tank there that is going to fear you every single time you either dot or crit him is so stinking annoying. Not to mention that they had to work in this really silly mechanic where enemy Sith, or actually I think it's just all Sith. Sith enemies can't gain bonus turn meter at all. So that neuters a bunch of stuff, including actually Emperor Palpatine and, well, really Emperor Palpatine, even when he's with Starkiller. So you get to do some fun stuff with that, putting him in a bunch of random comps. Maybe not overall the best value, but still pretty stinking good to the point where him and Malak are gonna, or him and Darth Revan are gonna fall pretty high on the overall prioritization list. The next 3, we're gonna put them in pairs, and this is a little wonky. If this were like a true one-to-one comparison of like legendaries as standalone characters, Chewbacca and CLS would not be high on this list at all. They are fantastic characters, as well as with 3PO, but these characters are good together, and that's kind of why they're this high up, where they really start to hit a whole new level of fun. And I might be overestimating them a little bit because they've had a datacron for the last 4 months that has just let them do a lot of fun things. We've countered Jabba with it, and really strong Jabbas several times. They would have just been a huge pain in the butt otherwise. But Chewbacca, I feel like he used to have a lot more plug and play viability because his guard, which prevents crits, he used to be able to put it on like a lot of different characters that ended up being helpful for a lot of theory crafting. There was a counter where Gas would actually go and beat SLKR. Most of that just has gone away, and it's been really hard to take him away from Han or really a Rebel team entirely. He does have some viability with Smuggler, so you don't have to have CLS, but it'd be really weird if you didn't, right? Like that just doesn't seem like the natural order of things. So overall, he's good, but again, Chewbacca is not a better character than Darth Revan or Malak, but he does really start to have that importance when you start to throw CLS into the mix. And this is just one of the leads that has aged so stinking well. So Rebel allies have 50% counter chance, defense, 15 offense. I mean, this is like an old kit so far. Like this is a really old kit, just like a few percentages, whatever. But this is where it really gets gross. Whenever an enemy resists a detrimental effect, Rebel allies gain 5% turn meter. So both of these things have aged super well over time. A lot of teams just have huge amounts of tenacity, whether it be from tenacity up or something in their kit just allows them to resist a bunch of debuffs like Padme. And the amount of debuffs that the Rebel teams are now dishing out has increased substantially, especially with Chewbacca. So I guess that probably should be mentioned. You really need Chewbacca for this team to do all the things that it does. But that's what's kind of made the team punch up so much right now, is because that lead is generating an obnoxious amount of turn meter. It's also good in the beginning, even without Chewbacca, like Chewbacca and Han and R2 and 3PO, or even without 3PO. Like he's always kind of maintained a decent place in the conversation. The reason why 3PO, or the Golden God, is going to rank higher than them just because he has more versatility. Yes, He is very good in the Commander Luke's team. That's probably his best home, but you can use him in a Padme team. You can use him in a Resistance team. You can use him in a JMK team. I'm not really sure why you would. I guess maybe you don't have Cat. I don't know. But overall, he just does have more versatility, and he does actually start to change counters. I know this is a really random example, but 3PO with Padme is what ruins the Emperor Palpatine counter versus Padme, because the way that he gives, I believe it's like protection up whenever they gain a buff that isn't something or other, and then it stops debuffs, and Vader can't get his stuff out and can't ability block. But all this to say, he actually changes counters on all the teams he's been on, a little bit unlike R2, where R2 is just kind of a nice add-on that improves things slightly, where 3PO is really making quite big strides. So very similar to how these three were a package, as well as Darth Revan and Malak were packages. We're going to move into the Jedi, and this is where things start to get really dirty between the three of them, where Jedi Knight Revan, Jedi Knight Luke, and to a lesser extent Grandmaster Yoda, they're beating Galactic Legend teams or other teams that are very much in that relevancy. The two of them have been known for beating SLKR. That's been a counter that's existed for a long time. I needed it in my last match very much so, because someone put SLKR in defense, which was kind of fun. Grandmaster Yoda is going to be kind of lowest overall here, just because he doesn't change a whole lot. He's very nice to have a multitude of squads, and one of the probably the better things about him is he just works with every single Jedi leadership, and even Galactic Republic for that matter. But really great under Jedi Master Luke, really great under Jedi Knight Luke, because he can take a bunch of turns and swoop back around to the leadership ability. Really good with Jedi Knight Revan, because they need more damage and they're constantly calling him to assist against Terminator. He just has a lot of use between all the Jedi leads, and that ends up giving him a better home here towards the top. Revan, just a lot of broken mechanics. I mean, there's really no other way to say it than that. He was the first one to really introduce a savior-like mechanic. He is going to let the whole team ignore taunt. He is fairly accessible earlier game. He gets to use some of his requirements similar to Darth Revan, but again, ends up getting help from higher tier characters to be able to really go the full distance here. So Jedi Knight Luke is going to be up next, and Jedi Knight Luke, I'm a little bit mixed on him. He is good, yes. He does do all these things like an irresistible stun on all 5 characters, but his requirements, he's really the first character we've talked about so far that requires relics, and actually he might be the only one in here that requires relics. Oh no, that's not true. But he's one of them that requires relics. And a lot of the characters he's required to bring to relics aren't good unless you jump through a certain amount of hoops. I'm looking at you, Captain Han. I'm looking at you, Rolo. I'm looking at you, Lando. Like, they're not very good. So overall, Jedi Luke is an amazing character, but he's going to fall a little bit short on overall value in prioritization, because you're not really getting the best bang for your buck, at least in comparison to some of the other ones that are going to come up next. Oh, I also need to make a note. This is a really random place to put it, but we're not going to be talking about Aphra, and the main reason for that, because it's not a super fair comparison, because none of her characters are accelerated. So from a value perspective, she's immediately at a disadvantage, and that's just something that's not going to age very well. So we're going to leave her out, unfortunately. And now we have the last two, and who I really think are the best bang for your bucks, not just within themselves, but in what the requirements do for your roster as a whole and how accessible they are. Second to last, essentially, is going to be Starkiller. Amazing character. We already talked about him a lot with the Emperor Palpatine lead. He is not glued to that. He can go out and do other things, but again, tons of viability in Jace through his own Omicrons, tons of viability in TW through Juhani's Omicrons, tons of viability in the Rote TB as well as Conquest. Just very, very good team, very, very good character. And his requirements are all excellent. Talon, Dash, Kyle Katarn, as well as Mara Jade are all really good characters, both, I guess Mara Jade with him, but mostly without him. And the only really sad thing about Starkiller is A, they're all required at relics, all of his requirements, and B, going after him super early on, you might not have all the teams to throw Dash or Talon into, or Mara Jade or whatever it is. So that's my only slight complaint, but I mean, we're putting him as the second most valuable legendary. He's very good. Both in what he can do and what he's providing via Rex. And last and certainly not least, our best guy here is going to be General Skywalker. Maybe it's just because I am the Clone Wars fan and I just love Anakin's whole storyline, the tragedy that he is. But I every single time I go to his event and I look at the requirements, I'm like, good, really good, kind of good. He just doesn't have losers. The worst characters that are as requirements are Droideka and Asajj Ventress, who are both pretty useful depending on what you're wanting to do. Just, I guess it depends on what else is going on in the rest of your roster, but you pretty much get the whole GG team, except for GG. Padme, 3PO, Shock, GK, Ahsoka, like these are all really good meta characters in the end game. And the other thing where he has a slight leg up on Starkiller is there aren't any true relic requirements for his event. It is very nice to have GK and B1 just so you don't hate yourself and have to redo things 100 times. But at the end of the day, even that's still 2 relic characters versus everyone else having significantly more. I think Giant Luke needs 9. And I guess Starkiller is at a pretty similar value of 4. But all in all, not only a fantastic kid that can actually end up going and punching up against some Galactic Legends, typically the weaker comps, but just a really fun character and really durable. He's very nice to use in Conquest, specifically versus people who are struggling just to beat nodes, because he won't typically 3-star them, but he will get through them because of the stand-up mechanic. And really, when you start to look at the 501st mechanics, they do really well in offense because most of the AIs are not smart enough not trigger 5's sacrifice and not give the team a ton of really, really good stats. So that is going to be our tier list. Again, not really trying to badmouth any of the Galactic Legends, but just trying, or not Galactic Legends, Legends, just trying to give a fuller view of where value is from our point of view. And yeah, again, we didn't talk about Afro because it's not really a fair comparison right now. But thank you guys for watching, and until the next time, stay awesome.